What if one public message could reshape an international crisis? Not because of the words themselves, but because of everything standing behind them. In modern geopolitics, military power is rarely measured only by missiles, bombers, or aircraft carriers. Sometimes it is measured by perception, by credibility, by whether an opponent believes a threat is simply political theater, for the final warning before action. That is exactly why recent tensions surrounding Iran have attracted so much attention from military planners around the world. The debate is no longer focused only on nuclear facilities, sanctions, or diplomacy. It has evolved into something much larger. I contest over deterrence. I contest over who can convince the other side that escalation carries unacceptable costs. Because in today's strategic environment, preventing a conflict can be just as important as winning one. And history repeatedly shows that the most decisive battles are often fought long before the first shot is fired. To understand why, we have to look beyond headlines and examine how modern coercive diplomacy actually works. Contrary to popular belief, governments rarely react to a single speech, a social media post, or even one military deployment. Major strategic decisions are usually influenced by an accumulation of signals. Political statements, military movements, intelligence assessments, economic pressure, diplomatic back channels. Each individual action may appear limited, but together they create an increasingly clear picture of intent. Military strategists sometimes describe this as building a ladder of pressure. Each step raises the perceived cost of refusing compromise while leaving room for negotiations before open conflict begins. That approach has become especially important in an era where direct confrontation between major military powers carries enormous risks. No responsible government wants to stumble into a wider regional war through miscalculation. Instead, both sides attempt to shape each other's decisions long before missiles ever leave their launchers. This is where credibility becomes the center of the equation. A warning has value only if the opposing side believes it could actually be enforced. That credibility is rarely established through words alone. It is supported by visible military readiness, operational planning, alliance coordination, and the demonstrated ability to act if diplomacy fails. Modern intelligence organizations spend enormous effort trying to determine exactly that question. Not simply what another government says, but whether it appears willing and capable of carrying out its stated objectives. Military deployments often play an important role in that assessment. The movement of carrier strike groups, long-range bomber exercises, air defense repositioning, logistics activity, all of these can send strategic signals without requiring combat. Sometimes these deployments are designed primarily for operational readiness. Other times they also serve a political purpose by demonstrating available military options. The challenge for policymakers is ensuring that those signals increase deterrence without unintentionally triggering escalation. That balance has become increasingly difficult, especially in regions where multiple actors possess advanced missiles, drones, cyber capabilities, and extensive surveillance networks. Every visible military movement may be interpreted in several different ways. One side may view it as defensive reassurance. The other may interpret it as preparation for offensive action. That uncertainty creates one of the greatest dangers in international security: miscalculation. History offers numerous examples where leaders acted not because they wanted war, but because they feared waiting would leave them in a weaker position. As a result, modern crisis management depends heavily on communication, not only through public statements, but through private diplomatic channels that remain active even during periods of intense confrontation. These channels help reduce uncertainty, clarify intentions, and provide opportunities for de-escalation before events spiral beyond political control. Public rhetoric often attracts the most attention, yet experienced diplomats understand that quiet negotiations frequently carry equal, if not greater, significance. Military power and diplomacy are therefore not competing approaches. They often operate together. Visible military readiness may strengthen diplomatic leverage. Diplomatic engagement may reduce the need for military action. Neither can function effectively without the other. This interaction explains why strategic messaging has become increasingly sophisticated. Governments now consider not only what they communicate, but also how, when, and through which platform those messages are delivered. Timing matters. Audience matters. Context matters. A statement delivered during active negotiations may carry a very different meaning than identical words issued months earlier. Likewise, military exercises conducted during a period of stability send a different signal than similar deployments during an active regional crisis. Analysts therefore evaluate entire patterns rather than isolated events. No single announcement tells the full story. Instead, intelligence communities assemble thousands of individual indicators into broader assessments. Satellite imagery, logistics activity, industrial production, force readiness, diplomatic meetings. Economic measures. Together they provide a more reliable understanding of strategic intentions than any single headline ever could. This broader perspective is especially important when examining tensions involving Iran and the United States. Public attention often focuses on dramatic rhetoric, but professional military planners are usually asking different questions. Has force posture changed? Have regional deployments shifted? Are diplomatic channels still functioning? Are both sides creating space for negotiation, or reducing it? Those answers often reveal more than political speeches themselves, because successful deterrence is rarely about convincing domestic audiences. It is about influencing the calculations of decision-makers across the negotiating table. Every government ultimately asks the same fundamental question. If we continue on our current course, will the costs become greater than the benefits? That calculation sits at the center of nearly every major international crisis, and it is precisely where military capability, political credibility, intelligence assessments, and diplomacy all converge. The headlines may focus on individual statements, but beneath those headlines lies a far more complex contest. A contest of perception, preparation, patience, and strategic decision-making. Because in modern warfare, the most important victory may be the conflict that never begins. And understanding how nations attempt to prevent or prepare for that outcome is essential before examining what could happen next. If deterrence depends on credibility, then credibility depends on consistency. That is one of the oldest principles in strategic studies. Governments may issue strong public statements during a crisis, but their real influence comes from whether those statements align with observable actions. Military planners understand this better than anyone. They rarely evaluate speeches in isolation. Instead, they compare political messaging with logistics, force posture, alliance coordination, intelligence collection, and operational readiness. When those elements point in the same direction, deterrence becomes more persuasive. When they point in different directions, credibility begins to erode. This is why major military deployments are often interpreted as political signals as much as operational preparations. An aircraft carrier entering a region, long-range bombers conducting exercises, air-defense units changing positions, strategic transport aircraft increasing activity. Each movement may have immediate military purposes, but together they also communicate resolve. The objective is not always to initiate conflict. Very often it is to convince an opponent that continuing escalation would be increasingly costly. That calculation affects every decision made inside a national security establishment. Political leaders must evaluate military risk. Military commanders assess operational feasibility. Economic officials estimate the consequences of prolonged instability. Intelligence agencies examine the intentions of opposing governments. Each institution contributes a different perspective. Only after those assessments are combined can a government determine its next course of action. This explains why major international crises rarely move in a straight line. Periods of sharp rhetoric are often followed by quieter diplomatic engagement. Military deployments may increase while negotiations continue behind closed doors. Publicly, governments project confidence. Privately, they search for ways to avoid unintended escalation. These parallel tracks are not contradictions. They are fundamental features of modern crisis management. One of the greatest challenges facing decision-makers today is escalation control. Military technology has evolved dramatically over the past 2 decades. Precision-guided weapons, long-range drones, cyber operations, space-based intelligence, artificial intelligence supporting battlefield awareness. These capabilities allow nations to respond more quickly than ever before, but they also compress decision timelines. Leaders may have only hours to evaluate events that once unfolded over days. That speed increases the danger of misunderstanding. A military exercise might be interpreted as preparation for attack. Routine reconnaissance flights may be viewed as targeting operations. Burr incidents can be difficult to attribute with certainty. In such an environment, clear communication becomes just as important as military strength. This is why experienced strategists frequently emphasize signaling rather than surprise. A predictable signal allows opponents to adjust their behavior without losing complete control of events. Unexpected actions, by contrast, create uncertainty, and uncertainty often produces overreaction. For that reason, successful deterrence is not measured only by military capability. It is measured by whether both sides continue believing that restraint remains the safer option. Iran and the United States illustrate this dynamic particularly well. Despite periods of intense confrontation over many years, both countries have generally demonstrated an awareness of escalation risks. Public rhetoric has sometimes been forceful. Military deployments have occasionally increased. Regional tensions will periodically intensify. Yet communication channels have often remained active through intermediaries and diplomatic partners. Those channels reduce the probability that tactical incidents develop into broader wars. None of this guarantees stability. Regional crises remain inherently unpredictable. Unexpected events can rapidly alter political calculations. Domestic politics may reshape national priorities. Economic pressure may influence strategic decisions. Technological developments continue changing the balance between offense and defense. These factors ensure that every future crisis will contain its own unique challenges. Looking ahead, analysts generally discuss several possible trajectories. The first is sustained deterrence. Military readiness remains high. Diplomatic communication continues. Neither side achieves all of its objectives, but neither believes war offers a better alternative. The second possibility is prolonged strategic competition. Economic sanctions, regional proxy activity, cyber operations, intelligence competition, political pressure. These tools may become the preferred instruments of rivalry while avoiding direct military confrontation. The third possibility is unintended escalation, not because either government actively seeks a wider conflict, but because an isolated incident is misunderstood or mismanaged. History reminds us that wars sometimes begin through accumulated miscalculations rather than deliberate political decisions. That possibility explains why professional military organizations invest enormous effort into crisis communication, operational discipline, and rules governing the use of force. Ultimately, the most important lesson may be broader than any single country or any single dispute. Modern power is no longer defined only by the size of an army. It is increasingly determined by the ability to combine military capability, economic resilience, technological innovation, intelligence collection, alliance coordination, and diplomatic flexibility into one coherent strategy. Success belongs not simply to the nation with the strongest weapons, but to the nation capable of integrating every instrument of national power. That transformation is reshaping military doctrine around the world. Future conflicts are unlikely to be decided by firepower alone. They will depend on information, decision-making, logistics, industrial capacity, and the ability to influence an opponent's calculations before large-scale combat even begins. For military analysts, that may be the most significant development of all. The battlefield no longer begins where armies meet. It begins inside command centers, inside intelligence assessments, inside diplomatic negotiations, and inside the calculations made long before the first missile is launched. That is why every public statement, every military deployment, and every diplomatic meeting deserves careful analysis not as isolated events, but as pieces of a much larger strategic puzzle. Because the true contest is rarely about a single speech or a single warning. It is about whether nations can shape each other's decisions without crossing the threshold into open war. And that question will continue to define international security for years to come. So what do you think? Has modern deterrence become more effective because of advances in technology and intelligence? Or has it become more dangerous because decisions must now be made faster than ever before? Can military strength alone prevent future conflicts? Or will diplomacy remain the decisive factor in maintaining strategic stability? Share your thoughts in the comments below. The discussion surrounding modern deterrence is only becoming more important, and the answers may shape the future of global security for decades to come.